Hello viewers of Cold Breath. Today I will tell you a story I encountered. If you find this story interesting, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so that I have the motivation to tell you more interesting stories. That rectangular hole. This story is based on a real experience I had when I was a child, but dramatized for effect. I was 5, maybe 6 when this happened. We lived in this big old house, one of those 2-story types you see in small towns, where the paint was fading and the wooden beams creaked under your footsteps. Our house was red on 3 sides, but for some reason my dad never got around to painting the 4th. It was just left white, like he ran out of time, energy, or maybe he just stopped caring. The house had a certain creepy vibe to it, but structurally it was in good shape. The front and back porches were solid, no sagging or rotting boards, just old wood that held on after years of weathering. But to me, the most important part of that house wasn't the solid porches or the old foundation. No, it was the door to my bedroom, or more specifically, that rectangular hole in the top left corner of the door. The hole wasn't supposed to be there. One day, the wooden panel just vanished, leaving this perfect rectangle you could see through. Maybe it was a break in the old wood. Maybe it was the house itself, giving us another reason to think something was off. Either way, I hated it. That rectangular hole wasn't big, but it was enough to see through. And at night, when the hallway light was on, it cast this eerie glow that framed the hole perfectly. Every night, I'd lay in bed and try not to look at it, but I always did. The rest of the house, that was the setup to the nightmare that came after. You walked in the front door, and right in front of you were the stairs leading up to the 2nd floor. To the left was the living room, to the right was the dining room, and behind them, the kitchen. The bathroom was across from the living room, tucked into a dark little hallway. And upstairs, that's where my room was. My bed was shoved into the back left corner of the room. My brother's bed was against the wall, perpendicular to mine. His head was about 3 feet away from that dark brown door with that rectangular hole. We heard stories about the house being haunted. My parents would talk about seeing a woman in old-fashioned clothes down in the kitchen, or a man wandering the stairs in a dusty coat from the 1800s. I never saw them. I never wanted to. But I heard enough to know the house wasn't normal. One night, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for sleep to take me. My brother was already out, breathing soft and slow, and the only light was from the hallway, spilling in through that damn rectangular hole in the door. I couldn't stop looking at it. It was like a window to another world, a world I didn't want any part of. Then, it happened. The first creak of the stairs. Now the first step of the stairs always made a noise. You know the one, old wood groaning like it's about to give in. I thought at first it was my mom or dad, but after a few more creaky steps, I knew it wasn't them. These steps were slow, deliberate, heavy in a way that felt wrong. Step, creak, step, creak. I felt my heart pick up speed, pounding so hard I was sure it would wake my brother. But he didn't stir. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but the footsteps kept coming. Each one louder than the last, each one getting closer. I pulled the blanket up to my chin, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from that rectangular hole. Step, creak, and then the steps stopped, right at the top of the stairs, right outside my room. I stared at the hole, praying that whoever, whatever, was out there would turn and go the other way. But I heard the footsteps again. They were coming toward my door. Closer, closer. My whole body was shaking, but my eyes stayed glued to that rectangular hole, my lifeline to the hallway beyond. I waited, every muscle in my body frozen with fear. Then slowly she appeared. A woman, tall, thin. Her clothes were old, something out of a history book. Her face was gaunt, her cheeks hollowed out, her skin stretched tight like she hadn't eaten in years. I could only see the side of her head at first, but then she turned. She turned right toward that rectangular hole. Her face. Oh God, her face. There were no eyes, just black, empty sockets staring straight through me. Her mouth hung open, but there were no lips, only a black void where her mouth should have been. I felt my heart stop. She stood there, inches from the hole, and then she began to lean toward it, slowly, menacingly. her hollow face coming closer and closer until it filled the entire rectangular space, staring right into my soul. And then, she smiled, a twisted, hollow thing. "Go to sleep," she whispered, her voice low and rasping, like dead leaves scraping across the pavement. The way she said it, with those empty sockets fixed on me, it was like she wasn't giving me a choice. Like if I didn't go to sleep right then and there, something worse would happen. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I just lay there, frozen, staring through that rectangular hole at the woman with no eyes. Then she was gone, like she was never there at all. But the fear stayed. The cold sweat, the shaking. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I slept, I wouldn't wake up. Eventually, I must have passed out, because the next thing I remember, it was morning. The hallway light was off, and my brother was already up. But the fear, that stayed with me. And yeah, I'll admit it, I wet the bed. The fear that came from that nightmare, it was real enough to leave me shaking the next morning. It was just a nightmare. It had to be. That rectangular hole was still in the door, the same as it always was, and nothing seemed different. But I couldn't stop thinking about it, how real it had felt, how cold her voice had been when she said those words. "Go to sleep."